back to Slow Living. I'm Esther and today I'm going to show you how to make a reusable produce bag to replace something like this. This is the second video I'm doing in a series for Plastic Free July, where basically we try to replace some of the disposable, plastic, nasty type things we use in our day-to-day with reusable things instead, so that it's better for our environment. I'm going to show you how to make a basic drawstring bag. So if you're not into fresh produce, you can use this bag for other things like storing shoes or a handbag, like a dust bag type thing, or a soap saver bag, a laundry bag, a little reusable cutlery bag. They all sort of use the same techniques. So it's up to you, and you can just change the fabric according to what you want to make. The main thing that will make this a produce bag is that you need it to be very light. So obviously when you weigh things like apples and oranges, you don't want to add extra weight to that, otherwise you're going to be paying more every time. So make sure you choose a fabric that's nice and light. The second thing is that they're usually made of like a mesh or like a see-through material, so that you can see what's inside the bag without having to open it. So while that's not essential, it's much more convenient. And I'll talk you through some of the fabrics that we can use. Most mesh fabrics you can find are synthetic, so there'll be a polyester or a nylon, which does make them strong, but obviously synthetic. Kudos if you can find cotton, hemp, or maybe even a recycled nylon. That would be amazing, but they are much harder to find. One thing you do want to look out for, if you're hand sewing this bag, you want to look for a mesh that is not too stretchy, or preferably not stretchy at all. Because otherwise when you stretch the bag, your stitches will just break. And that'll be a sad time for everyone. Alternatively, you can use like a light woven fabric, so something like a cotton muslin, maybe linen, which might be a little bit heavier, or if you have leftover scrap fabrics, just make sure you keep them nice and light. The bad thing about this is that woven fabrics will fray. So if you're a beginner and you don't have access to an overlocker or a serger or a zigzag stitch, you're going to find that the inside of your bag is going to fray over time. So it's not a huge deal breaker. Your almonds and stuff might get like mixed up in loose threads, but it is something to be aware of. You can Google how to do a basic French seam if you're hand sewing. It's a bit ambitious, but maybe have a go. It'll definitely increase the longevity of your bags, and that's really the name of the game. A couple more things if you're hand sewing. I would recommend that you try doing a back stitch and not just a running stitch, I think it's called. Google back stitch. I'm not going to show you how because I'm not 100% sure how either. And also you want to aim for really tiny stitches. So my machine sews at about 4 stitches per centimeter. That would be ambitious for hand sewing, so I recommend aiming for 2 to 3. And then you will have a much less likely chance of your bag breaking. Basically, the bigger your stitch, the higher the chance of the stitches breaking. And for a produce bag, that's probably the worst thing that could happen. So in a store. I'm really sorry for raving on about hand sewing and how hard it is and stuff like that. But if you're a beginner, chances are you don't have a machine. So I feel like it's important to tell you this stuff before you launch into a project. There's nothing worse than putting so much time and effort into something only to have it break the first time you use it. So I would rather tell you now, and then you can really put some extra care into it and create something that's going to last a really long time. If you haven't been turned off making this bag by now, let's get started.
Okay, so here I have folded my fabric in half, and I'm using the fold of the fabric as the bottom of my bag. You'll see that I've used an old plastic bag as sort of a guide for how big I want my bag to be, lengthwise and widthwise, but yours can vary, and it will vary according to the fabric that you're using. I encourage you to sort of figure out how to maximize your fabric as well. It doesn't have to be a specific dimension, so try to use up all the fabric as economically as possible. Now I'm just using pins to mark where I'm going to cut. You can use chalk or anything like that. Also try to use the lines in your mesh to cut as straight as possible, because that will prevent your bag from warping. Okay, so this is the piece of fabric I'm going to use. I have no idea why this clip is in slow motion and I can't fix it, so it just looks really dramatic. But basically I'm folding it in half, and these top edges that I'm going to show you when we get up to speed are the bits which we're going to iron down and start assembling. So what we want to do is fold down that top of the bag 1 centimeter and iron it down flat. We're basically going to use these as guidelines later on. After folding it once with the 1 centimeter, you want to fold it again, approximately 2.5 centimeters, and iron that down flat as well. So here you can see I've done it all the way from one end of the top of the bag to the other end, and you also want to do the same for the other side. Now we're going to use a pin to mark where that fold ends. This is so that we know where to sew up to on the side. So when we pop the two sides of our bag together, we can put the two pin marks side by side, and then we can actually pin them together, because that's how we're going to know where to stop sewing, or start sewing actually. As you'll see in the next clip, the point where the pins are is where I'm going to start stitching. You want to make sure you reinforce that with a couple of back stitches. That'll make sure that your stitches don't come undone on the sides. So sew all the way down the side of the bag and then reinforce down the bottom, and do the same to the other side. Okay, this bit is a little bit tricky and it's going to be really hard for me to explain in words, so please look at the visual really carefully. This is the side that you've just finished sewing, up where we put the pins, remember? Now use that bit of seam allowance that I'm trying to show you there to fold over. It's approximately 1 centimeter. Fold that over, and then use the 1 centimeter and 2.5 centimeter guides that you pressed earlier to refold the side of the bag. This is reinforcing the side that we're going to use to put our drawstring in later. So now use a pin to secure that in place, because we're going to sew that down. Now there should be 4 of these little turnovers that you have to do, 2 on each side of the bag. So go ahead and repeat that same step for all 4 corners. When you see 2 corners side by side, it might make a bit more sense how the drawstring is going to come together. So there we go. With both sides done, you can see that when we thread the drawstring through that top part, it will come out one side and then into the other. So now you can see where that pin is and the direction that it's pointing. That's where we're going to be stitching straight across from one end to the other, and then the same for the other side. So just be careful that you're not sewing the top of the bag together. You obviously don't want to sew both sides together, because then you won't have an opening for your bag. So make sure that all the other parts of the bag are out of the way when you're just stitching across that top edge. Make sure that you're always back tacking so that your stitches don't come undone at the start and at the end of your rows of stitching as well. Okay, now we can flip our bag the right way out. So all the seam allowance should be on the inside of the bag. Pull out the corners so that they're nice and neat. And now we're just going to give it a quick press with the iron. It'll help to just give it a nice structure, and also you won't be able to press it once you put the drawstring in, so it's better to do it now. Okay, so now we want to find a bit of string or cord, whatever you have lying around. Make sure that it is nice and light, because again, you don't want to add to the weight of the bag. And just make sure that it is long enough so that you can open the bag completely, and then give it a little bit of extra so that you can either tie a knot or fasten the bag somehow. Now you want to find a decent sized safety pin and pop that through the end of the string. This is what we're going to use to thread through the top of the bag, so just make sure that it's nice and secure. Now all you have to do is start to thread it through the top of the bag, like so. And keep going. Try to do little increments at a time rather than threading it all and then trying to pull the whole thing through. Do little bits and then move the fabric along so that it's not all bunched up. Okay, so we're pretty much done. Make sure you don't pull out the other end of the string without tying it off first. Just tie a simple knot so that it doesn't come undone. And now you can sort of just move the fabric evenly across the top of the bag. And voila! Your reusable produce bag is now complete.
Let me know how you went with this project. I would love to see your finished product. You can follow me here, of course, and on Instagram at Slow Living, and that's slow with an E. Until next time.